Welcome into Bracketology Update. We're going to be doing this every single Tuesday leading up to the unveiling of the field of 68. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking at the latest Bracketology that was released today by Joe Lenardi, and then we're going to be filling out that bracket and making our predictions all the way to the Final Four in San Antonio and ultimately making our selection of who we think is going to be the national champ. So let's go ahead and waste no time. Let's get into the latest Bracketology. With our top overall seed, really no change from last time that I looked at this. It was the Auburn Tigers. Big win by Auburn on the road in Tuscaloosa, being the number 2 team in the country. They have a big one as well in the midweek against Arkansas. I really don't see this changing. I think that Auburn, without a collapse at the end of the season, is going to be your number 1 overall seed. So Auburn from the SEC is your top overall seed. The first team out currently is VCU, and your last team in out of the ACC is Wake Forest. So let's go ahead and now go down to the bubble watch. So your last 4 byes are Texas, West Virginia, BYU, and Vanderbilt. So you have 2 teams from the SEC, 2 teams from the Big 12 in the last 4 byes. So those teams right now are safely on the right side of the bubble, so they wouldn't have to be in the first round games in Dayton. Meanwhile, the last 4 in, these where you would have your first 4 in games, so those would all be in Dayton. Those teams are San Diego State, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Wake Forest. So those teams still have some work to do to get on that last 4 byes and be safely out of that, because ultimately you do want to be not in that first 4 games, though we have seen in the past that some teams have gone on a run, like NC State last year. They were the 11 seed in this tournament. So you never know what happens. You could be on the last 4 in. You can ultimately make your way to the Final Four. So those are our last 4 in. Now let's look on the teams that are on the wrong side of the bubble in the first 4 out. Those are VCU, who we saw being the first 4 team out in this latest bracketology. Georgia out of the SEC, SMU, who has 0 quad 1 wins. They had a bad loss on Saturday as well against Wake Forest, so they have some work to do. North Carolina, a team that was the number 1 seed in the field of 68 in last year's tournament, is one of the first 4 teams out. So North Carolina, I feel like at this point, have to really win out at this point and make some noise in the ACC tournament if they want to get into this field of 68. Now let's go on to the next 4 out: Indiana, Xavier, Kansas State, and UC Irvine. Kansas State really had a bad loss last night. I believe it was to Utah. So they'll have some work to do. They're like North Carolina. They may have to win their conference tournament to even get that automatic bid to get into the field. So the next 4 out, those are teams that definitely need to do some work over these next couple of weeks and ultimately into their respective conference tournaments. So that is the bubble watch. Now let's go on to the risers and fallers here in this bracket. So first, let's start off in the South. Let's go ahead and note the risers and the fallers. Maryland out of the Big Ten is up to a 5 seed. Arkansas, like we just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, they are in the last 4 in, so they would be in the 12 seed actually. So usually whenever we see a first round game, it's between 2 11 seeds, but this time it's 2 12 seeds with Arkansas, Wake Forest. Arkansas, like I mentioned, they do face on the road against Auburn, so they have it's definitely going to be a tough challenge for them, but if they are to sneak away with a victory, that would definitely be a huge resume booster for the Razorbacks. So we'll see how they can come out. So that would be their first of 2 playing games between Arkansas and Wake Forest. We'll obviously have 2 16-seed play-ins, as you see right there, with Omaha and Southeast Missouri State being the 16-seed matchup in the South. Moving on down the list here, the risers and the fallers in the South region. St. John's, the Johnnies, are up to a 4 seed. Ole Miss, with their recent loss this past weekend against Mississippi State, down to a 6 seed. UC San Diego, listed as the automatic qualifier, is up to an 11 seed. Wisconsin, with a dominating performance this past weekend against Purdue, up to a 3 seed. Towson, as well as automatic qualifier, is listed as the 14 seed. Texas up to a 10 seed after the recent victory over Kentucky. Iowa State up to a 2 seed, and Iowa State starting to get healthy as well, so definitely look out for that team. Moving on over to the Midwest, we do have a new team in the field with Quinnipiac being in the Midwest. Creighton down to an 8 seed out of the Big East. Missouri, one of the hottest teams in the SEC, is up to a 5 seed. George Mason, another automatic qualifier we see here, is up to an 11. Mississippi State, like I mentioned with the recent victory on the road against Ole Miss, is up to a 7 seed. So that's the top portion of the bracket. Now let's go on to the West, where we see Drake fall down to a 12. So in the recent bracketologies, Drake was an 11 seed. We see them move down to a 12 seed in this latest projection. Same with Texas Tech. They were a 3 seed last time that we saw them. Texas Tech is in the 4 seed now. So Clemson up to a 6, Vanderbilt down to an 11, Purdue down to a 3, Memphis down to a 7 seed, BYU is up to a 10 seed, and Montana, is a new team in the field. Last but not least, the East, Kansas down to a 5. Kansas, another bad loss, once again to Utah. Though Utah is starting to play some really terrific basketball, that's a team to watch if they can find a way to pick up some wins heading into the month of March. We will see if Utah can sneak into this field. Oklahoma down to an 11 seed after the recent loss against LSU. This is a team that's definitely in the downward trend. They would face off against San Diego State in another play-in. And that is the risers and fallers for that. So let's go ahead and waste no time once again and get into our bracket predictions. So if you want to, at home, I'm using PDF Filler. So if you want to go ahead, maybe create a bracket like this using some bracketology and do your own predictions, I use PDF Filler for this. So let's go ahead and look at the top left portion here of the bracket where we have the number 1 overall seed, the Auburn Tigers. Here in this bracket, they would be facing off against Omaha and Southeast Missouri State. And I think that Auburn, whoever comes out of that, will ultimately be the victor of that. So we have the number 1 overall seed taking care of business. Now we have the first 8-9 matchup with Gonzaga and Utah State. I think this would be a phenomenal matchup. I'm actually going to go with the Gonzaga Bulldogs here. I think that Gonzaga is starting to play well down the stretch. And I think that they take down the Utah State team that's definitely been in this tournament before, so that would definitely be a good matchup to get us going there in the 8-9. 5 seed Maryland would take on 12 seed Arkansas and Wake Forest. I would ultimately have Arkansas winning that playing game to ultimately fall in there. I think that Arkansas, they do have the talent to go far, but they just haven't really been playing consistent basketball for me to pick them to go far in this tournament. So let's go on now to the 4 and the 13 seed, St. John's and Arkansas State. Now, Arkansas State's one of my favorite upset picks here, but I cannot pick them against Rick Pitino and St. John's. So give me St. John's to move on here to the second round of this tournament as we have Ole Miss and UC San Diego in the 6 and 11. Here's my first upset. I'm going to go with UC San Diego, pick a West Coast team to move on. Ole Miss is one of those teams, like I mentioned, with Arkansas. They had just been too up and down for me. So I'm going to pick a first upset of the tournament here. Wisconsin and Towson. I think that Wisconsin takes care of business. Wisconsin, their offense has been on fire as of late, so give me the Badgers to move on. St. Mary's in Texas in the 7 and the 10. Give me the Gales of St. Mary's to move on. I think that they could definitely take down Texas in that matchup. And then Iowa State Bryant, no major upset here. I'm going to go with the Cyclones moving on here to the second round. So let's go ahead and fill out this portion of the bracket, and then we'll move on to the top right portion of it. So let's go to Auburn and Gonzaga. I think that Auburn really would have no problem in taking down Gonzaga, and this one is the number 1 overall seed for a reason, and they're going to be a tough out once this tournament starts here in just under a month. Number 5 seed Maryland, number 4 seed St. John's would be a fantastic matchup, but give me the Johnnies moving on there. So give me St. John's to move on to the Sweet 16. UC San Diego, the Cinderella story of this bracket so far versus the number 3 seed Wisconsin. Give me the Badgers to move on here. So give me Wisconsin. And then St. Mary's and Iowa State. Give me the Cyclones to move on in this one. It would definitely be a defensive battle between these two teams, but give me Iowa State. So really all chalk in this one. I pretty much have all the top 4 seeds advancing. And we have Auburn versus St. John's. This would definitely be a heck of a matchup to watch. But since this game's in Atlanta, would definitely be a home, pretty much a home game for Auburn. So give me the Tigers to move on. And then Wisconsin, Iowa State. Going to go with a mild upset here. Give me the Badgers out of the Big Ten, moving on to Elite 8. So we have Auburn and Wisconsin. And I know that this is really all chalk here in this region. But Auburn I mean, how can you not pick against them the way that they've been playing as of late? I know that they had that recent loss to Florida, but they bounced back this past Saturday, like I mentioned, to a really good Alabama team. So give me Auburn being the first team to punch their ticket to the Final Four. And we're going to go now to the top right portion of the bracket where we see the number 1 seed Alabama face off against Quinnipiac. I think that Alabama has no problem here. They roll to the second round of the tournament. Look at this matchup. Creighton and Baylor in the 8-9 would definitely be a heck of a matchup. But give me the Creighton Blue Jays moving on there. I think that Creighton with Ryan Kalkbrenner, you never know what you're going to get with him. I think that he's a terrific basketball player. I think that would be a tough matchup for Baylor to defend him. So give me Creighton out of the Big East to move on to the second round. Missouri and Yale. Yale pulled off an upset just a year ago against the SEC school. Do I see it? No, I do not. Like I mentioned, Missouri, one of the hottest teams in the country right now. So give me the Tigers to move on. Michigan and High Point. Don't see an upset here. Michigan's one of my favorite teams to watch this season. So give me the Wolverines to move on. Illinois and George Mason. George Mason's also one of those teams I could see pulling off an upset, but I just don't really like this matchup against an Illinois team that's really playing well down the stretch. Kentucky, UNC Greensboro. I know that people are going to laugh about Kentucky, how they always lose in the first round, but give me the Cats. I know that their defense hasn't been playing too well, so give me Kentucky. They're going to have to put up some wins, though, if they do want to stay in this number 3 seed. So give me the Cats. Mississippi State and Nebraska, give me the Bulldogs to move on. I think that Chris Jans is doing a terrific job with the squad this year. So give me Mississippi State. And then Houston, Cleveland State, don't really see an upset as well. Give me Houston to move on there. So let's go on now to the second round matchups here. Alabama and the number 8 seed Creighton. There's always a number 1 seed going down in the second round. And you know what? Let's have some fun. Give me the Creighton Blue Jays, the number 8 seed. Moving on to the Sweet 16. So give me my first major upset in this bracket. So number 5 seed Missouri, number 4 seed Michigan, 2 high-scoring teams. But give me Michigan here in this one. Give me Big Blue to move on. Let's go now to Illinois versus number 3 Kentucky. So we have another SEC versus Big Ten matchup. And give me another upset. I guess this is going to be my region of upsets. Give me the Fighting Illini to move on and beat Kentucky. So now we have number 7 seed Mississippi State and number 2 seed Houston. Houston playing really well. Big win on the road this past weekend on the road against Arizona. So give me Houston. And then we have the 8 seed Creighton, number 4 seed Michigan. Creighton just coming off of a huge upset. But I have their run ending there. I think that Michigan moves on to the Elite 8. So give me the Wolverines. And then we have number 6 Illinois, number 2 seed Houston. I'm going to go with Houston moving on past Illinois, though. That would be a great game. And then we have Michigan and Houston, the battle of the 4 and the 2 seed. Give me the Houston Cougars being the first Big 12 team punching their ticket to the Final Four down there in San Antonio. So that is the top portion of our bracket. Now let's move on to Florida's region, where we see the number 1 Florida Gators facing off against the number 16 seed Norfolk State. And give me Florida. I think that they have really no problem there. Number 8 seed Oregon, number 9 seed New Mexico. Oregon feels like every time they're in the tournament, they make a deep run. So give me Oregon to advance. Number 5 seed Marquette, number 12 seed Drake. Give me the number 12 seed Drake pulling off the upset. It feels like every year we always get these 12 or 5 upsets. So give me the Drake Bulldogs moving on. Texas Tech versus Zips of Akron. Give me Texas Tech. I think that Texas Tech, one of those teams that can make a deep run in this tournament. Clemson and Vanderbilt in the 6 versus 11 seed. Vanderbilt is a scrappy team, but give me Clemson. I think that the Tigers move on. They were here just this past year, and they made a heck of a run. So give me Clemson. And then number 3 seed Purdue, number 4 seed Jacksonville State. I think that Purdue keeps it rolling there. Number 7 seed Memphis and number 10 seed BYU. I'm actually going to go with BYU here in a mild upset. Memphis just been an up and down team as of late. So give me BYU out of the Big 12 moving on. And then Texas A&M versus number 15 seed Montana. Going to go with the Aggies. Texas A&M, I feel like, has been an underrated team in the SEC. Everyone's talking about Alabama. in Auburn. But Texas A&M is slowly flying under the radar, and they've been playing really well down the stretch there. So Florida and Oregon, don't see an upset here. Give me the Gators to move on there. I think that they move on to the Sweet 16. Drake and Texas Tech, the Cinderella story ends for Drake as I have Texas Tech advancing and ultimately facing off against Florida. 6 seed Clemson and 3 seed Purdue. Give me an upset once again. Give me the Tigers of Clemson to move on and beat Purdue. And then BYU and A&M would be a good game, though I would have to go with Texas A&M. I think that A&M is playing well. And then number 4 seed Texas Tech and 1 seed Florida. I actually have another number 1 seed falling here. Give me the Red Raiders. I think that the Red Raiders advance on to the Elite Eight, where they face the winner of Clemson and A&M, and give me Texas A&M to move on to the Elite Eight, where they would have an all-Texas battle to go to San Antonio, where we have the number 4 seed Texas Tech and number 2 seed Texas A&M. You know, give me another Big 12 team. Go with the Red Raiders, and they pull off a shocker there as the 4 seed makes it all the way to the Final Four. So let's go on now to the final region, where we see Duke face off against the winner of Southern and American. I think that they have no problem as the other number 1 seeds. So give me the Blue Devils to move on there. The 2-time defending national champs, 8 seed UConn and 9 seed Ohio State, would definitely be a heck of a matchup to watch. But you know what? Give me UConn. I know that they had that bad loss this past weekend against Seton Hall. But hey, we all know that if they make the tournament, I mean, they could either make a deep run or be out pretty early here. But give me UConn. Kansas, the number 5 seed and number 12 seed McNeese. Give me McNeese. I'm starting to be out on Kansas at the moment, the way that they've been playing lately. So give me McNeese. I picked McNeese to go pretty far last year, and they got knocked out by Gonzaga, so hopefully they can redeem us all. So give me McNeese. And then Michigan State and Lipscomb, give me the Spartans of Michigan State. Whenever Tom Izzo's squad is in this field, feels like every time they're making a deep run. They pulled off the upset last year against North Carolina. We'll see if they can do that magic once again. Number 6 seed UCLA versus the winner of San Diego State and Oklahoma. Give me San Diego State. But ultimately, I think that UCLA gets the job done there. So give me the Bruins to move on. And then we see Arizona and Utah Valley. Give me Arizona to move on to the second round. Louisville, West Virginia in the 7v10. I'm going to go with the ACC here. Go with the Louisville Cardinal. They definitely had, so far, a terrific season. We'll see if they can get the job done there. So give me the Louisville Cardinal to move on to the second round. And then Tennessee and Central Connecticut State, pretty easy pick here. Give me the Volunteers. They get the job done there and advance on. Duke and UConn could pull off the upset here once again, but Duke too talented, especially with Cooper Flagg running the show there with the Blue Devils. So give me Duke. McNeese in Michigan State. Do we see the Cinderella story moving on? No, we don't. Give me Michigan State moving past McNeese. Then UCLA and Arizona, an old West Coast battle, but give me Arizona moving on. Number 7 seed Louisville versus number 2 seed Tennessee. Give me an upset here. I'm going to go with Louisville. Could definitely think there would be one of those teams where if they're like a 6, 7 seed, they could definitely make a deep run in this tournament. So give me Louisville to pull off that upset. And then number 1 seed Duke, number 4 seed Michigan State. I'm going to have the chalk pretty much continuing here. Go with Duke. Moving on there. And then 3 seed Arizona, 7 seed Louisville. Let's keep Louisville's run moving on here. I'm going to have Louisville pulling off the upset, where I ultimately have them falling to Duke. I have Duke moving on to the Final Four and ultimately facing Houston in the Final Four. So our Final Four, I know it's pretty chalky with 2 1 seeds with Auburn and Duke. We have a 2 seed Houston and 4 seed Texas Tech. So in our first matchup is Auburn versus Texas Tech. Give me Auburn to move on there and face off against the winner of Houston and Duke, where I would have the number 2 seed Houston moving on to the national championship. So we have Auburn versus Houston. I know that they're the number 1 overall seed, but the way that they've been playing, it's hard to see them go out pretty early in this tournament. So give me Auburn cutting down the nets down there in San Antonio. So that is it for today's Bracketology. Let me know your Final Four picks as we are just almost at the end of this regular season. So we'll be doing this, like I mentioned, every single Tuesday leading up to the unveiling of the field of 68. So I appreciate everybody for tuning into today's video, and I'll catch y'all next time.